The most powerful Lycan king in 5 centuries was kneeling in my doorway at 3 a.m., rain soaking through his $1,000 suit, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction watching him beg. Sarah. Dominic Varen's voice cracked on my name. Actually cracked, like he was some lovesick teenager instead of the man who'd torn my heart out and fed it to the wolves 3 years ago. Please. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I leaned against the doorframe of my cottage, arms crossed, watching the rain plaster his dark hair to his forehead. Behind him, lightning split the sky over the Montana mountains. Thunder rolled through the valley where I'd built my sanctuary. My safe haven for wolves like me, the rejected ones, the broken ones, the ones the great and powerful Lycan court had deemed unworthy. You're getting mud on my porch, I said. His golden eyes, the eyes that used to make my knees weak, back when I was stupid enough to believe in fate and destiny and all that mate-bond nonsense, searched my face desperately, looking for some crack in my armor, I guessed. Some sign that the pathetic, trembling girl he destroyed still lived somewhere inside me. She didn't. I made a terrible mistake. He reached for my hand. I stepped back before he could touch me. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or just wounded pride that I dare deny him anything. My wolf has been dying, Sarah. Every day since I rejected you, he fades more. The healers say I have months left. Maybe weeks. And this is my problem because you're my mate. He said it like that should mean something. Like those words hadn't turned to ash in my mouth the moment he'd stood before the entire Lycan court, looked at me in my white ceremonial dress, and announced that I was unworthy of a king's mark. I remember the silence after he said it. The way 1,000 wolves had stared at me. Some pitying, most smirking. I remember his mother's satisfied smile. His father's cold nod of approval. And Dominic, my fated mate, the man whose soul was supposed to be the other half of mine, looking at me like I was dirt beneath his royal boots. I don't have a mate, I said. You made sure of that. The rejection was a mistake. The rejection was a choice. I kept my voice flat, emotionless. I'd practiced this moment 1,000 times in my head. Back when the wound was fresh and I'd fantasized about him crawling back to me. In those early fantasies, I'd screamed at him, cried, made him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But that was before I realized the best revenge was simply not caring anymore. I was young, he tried. My parents pressured me. The court wanted a queen from noble blood. Not a half-breed healer from a disbanded pack? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Yes, I remember the speech. You gave it in front of 500 people. Thunder crashed closer now. The rain intensified, and Dominic was shaking. From cold or from whatever was killing him, I couldn't tell. Didn't particularly care either way. Sarah, please. He bowed his head. The king of all Lycans, ruler of the 7 territories, commander of 10,000 wolves, bowing to me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Give you anything. Just give me another chance. 3 years ago, those words would have broken me all over again. I'd loved him so completely, so foolishly, that I probably would have taken him back even after everything. Even after the humiliation, the whispered insults, the noble-born she-wolves who'd cornered me at the ceremony to tell me I'd never been good enough for him anyway. But 3 years ago, I'd also been a scared 22-year-old who believed her worth came from being chosen by someone powerful. Now I was the founder of Moonhaven Sanctuary. I'd healed hundreds of rejected wolves, helped them find their strength again, built something real and good from the ashes of my own destruction. I didn't need Dominic Varen's validation anymore. I didn't need him at all. Go home, Dominic. I can't. His hands pressed against the wooden planks of my porch. Not without you. Then I guess you'll die on my doorstep. Because I'm not. A black SUV came tearing up my gravel driveway, headlights cutting through the storm. I tensed automatically. 3 years of running the sanctuary had taught me that unexpected visitors at 3 a.m. rarely brought good news. But Dominic just sighed. Something resigned in the sound. That'll be Marcus. Of course. His beta. His shadow. The man who'd stood silently beside him while Dominic had shattered my world. never once speaking up for me even though we'd been friends once. Marcus emerged from the SUV, his huge frame wrapped in a black coat. He was broad where Dominic was lean, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of face that never gave anything away. He nodded to me, barely a flicker of acknowledgement, before focusing on his king. "The council's calling an emergency session," Marcus said. "They need you on the secure line. Now." Dominic closed his eyes, and for a moment I saw how exhausted he really was, how thin his face had gotten, the dark circles under his eyes, the hollows in his cheeks. Whatever was killing him wasn't lying about its timeline. "Still not my problem. I need 5 more minutes," Dominic said. "It's about the curse, sire. They may have found something in the old texts." Dominic's jaw tightened. He pushed himself to his feet. It took him 2 tries, I noticed, and turned to me. "I'm not giving up, Sarah. I'll be back tomorrow. And the day after that. And every day until you understand that I'm not leaving without you. Enjoy the drive," I said, and started to close the door. "Just think about it, please." I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The door clicked shut between us, and I turned the deadbolt with a satisfying snap. Through the window, I watched Dominic walk toward the SUV. His steps were unsteady in the mud. The great and powerful Lycan king, stumbling like a drunk. Marcus had the phone already out, shielding it from the rain with his body as Dominic took it. I should have walked away. Should have gone back to bed and let him deal with his counsel and his curse and whatever else was making his life miserable. It was nothing to do with me anymore. But I didn't walk away. See, here's what Dominic didn't know. What nobody knew, actually. In the 3 years since he'd rejected me, my wolf had changed. Grown stronger. Most rejected wolves faded without their mate bond, becoming shadows of themselves. My wolf had done the opposite. She'd become something fierce and wild and powerful. Like the rejection had broken some cage inside me I hadn't known existed. And my hearing? My hearing had become supernatural even by Lycan standards. I could hear mice moving in the walls of houses a mile away. Could hear heartbeats through concrete. Could hear the private conversations of arrogant kings who assumed they were safe because they'd walked 20 feet from my door. I shouldn't have listened. I listened anyway. "Prophecy is confirmed, sire." Marcus's voice, pitched low, barely audible over the rain. "The old texts are clear. Only your true mate's bloodline can break the curse. The child must be born of. I know what it must be born of." Dominic's voice had changed. The trembling, broken man who'd been kneeling on my porch was gone. This voice was cold, calculating. The voice of a king who saw the world as a chessboard and everyone in it as pieces to be moved. "How long do I have?" "The healers say 6 months before the curse becomes irreversible. The pregnancy would need to." "I understand the timeline." A pause. Then Marcus, cautious. "And if she doesn't cooperate, sire?" "She will." Dominic laughed, and the sound made something twist in my stomach. "You saw her face. She's still hurt, still angry. That means she still feels something. I'll use that. Court her. Make her believe I've changed. She always was a romantic. She'll want to believe in the redemption story. And after the heir is born?" I pressed my hand flat against the door. My wolf had gone very, very still inside me. The kind of stillness that comes before violence. "After I have what I need from her?" Dominic's voice carried clearly through the rain, each word a knife. "I'll reject her again. Properly this time, with the full court ritual so there's no coming back from it. She's still just a means to an end, Marcus. A half-breed with useful bloodline." He opened the SUV door. "I don't need her forgiveness. I need her womb. Once she gives me an heir, she'll have served her purpose." The SUV doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life. Headlights swept across my windows as they turned around, and then they were gone, red taillights disappearing down the mountain road. I stood frozen in my darkened hallway, rain hammering against the roof, my hand still pressed to the door where Dominic had knelt and begged and lied through his royal teeth. "I need her womb. Once she gives me an heir, I'll reject her again. She's still just a means to an end. My wolf stirred inside me. Not with pain this time. I'd already survived Dominic Varen's worst. This was something different. Something older and darker and infinitely more dangerous. This was rage. He thought I was still that naive girl he'd broken 3 years ago. Thought he could waltz back into my life, flash those golden eyes, and manipulate me into giving him everything he wanted. Thought I'd be so desperate for his love that I'd believe any lie he told. He had no idea who I'd become. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I trusted with my life. My best friend Elena, one of my first rescued wolves, now my head healer at the sanctuary. She answered on the second ring, voice groggy. Sarah? It's 3 a.m. What? He came, I said. Dominic. He was just here. What? She was awake now, alert. What happened? Are you okay? I looked out the window at the empty driveway, the rain already erasing the tire tracks, erasing any evidence that the king had ever been here at all. I'm fine, I said, but I need to tell you something, and then I need you to help me figure out what to do about it. Anything. I took a breath, steadied myself. The king of all Lycans wants to use me as a broodmare and then throw me away. My wolf smiled inside me, a predator's smile. I think it's time we showed him exactly how badly he's underestimated me. Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. I didn't sleep that night. After Elena arrived, still in her pajamas, her red hair a wild mess, I told her everything. Every word I'd overheard. Every lie Dominic had whispered on my porch while planning to use me like livestock. She wanted to kill him. Actually suggested we poison his breakfast when he inevitably came crawling back. We're healers, I reminded her. We don't poison people. We could make an exception. I loved her for that. For the fury in her green eyes. For the way her hands shook with anger on my behalf. Elena had been one of my first rescues. A sweet-natured wolf from a southern pack whose mate had rejected her for her inability to bear children. She'd arrived at Moonhaven broken and hollow, convinced she had nothing left to offer the world. Now she ran my medical wing with an iron fist and a gentle heart, and she would have burned down Dominic's entire palace if I'd asked her to. But burning things down wasn't my style. Not anymore. I'm going to play along, I said. Elena stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're going to what? He wants to court me. Fine. Let him court me. I paced my small living room, mind racing. He thinks I'm still that stupid girl who believed in fairy tales and fated mates. Let him keep thinking that. While he's busy pretending to be the reformed king, I'll find out everything I can about this prophecy and this curse. And then, I stopped at the window. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere out there, Dominic Varen was probably congratulating himself on his performance last night. Probably thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. And then, I said quietly, I'll make sure he never hurts anyone the way he hurt me ever again. I gave myself 3 days before responding to his messages. They started arriving the morning after his visit. First came flowers. Rare moonblooms that only grew in the royal gardens, worth more than most wolves made in a year. Then jewelry, a diamond necklace that I donated to the sanctuary's emergency fund without even opening the box. Then letters, handwritten on cream paper with the royal seal, full of pretty words about regret and redemption and second chances. I let them pile up on my kitchen counter, unopened. On the third day, I finally called him back. Sarah. He answered before the first ring finished. Thank the goddess. I thought, I was afraid you'd. I'm not saying yes. I cut him off. But I'm not saying no either. Silence. Then, carefully, what are you saying? I stared at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the girl Dominic had rejected. That girl had been soft, hopeful, desperate to please. This woman had sharp edges and harder eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. I'm saying that if you want a chance with me, you're going to earn it. I kept my voice cool, measured, playing the part of a wounded woman protecting herself. No more showing up at 3 a.m. No more expensive gifts. You want to court me? Do it properly, slowly, and understand that I might still say no at the end of it. I'll do anything. The relief in his voice was almost convincing. Whatever you need, Sarah. However long it takes. Start by coming to dinner tomorrow night. My cottage, 7 o'clock. And Dominic. Yes. Come alone. I hung up before he could respond. The day before Dominic's visit, I drove 2 hours into the mountains to see Esme. The witch lived in a cabin so deep in the wilderness that most GPS systems couldn't find it. You had to know the old roads, the ones that weren't on any map. You had to leave your car at the base of a ravine and hike the last mile through pine forest so thick it blocked out the sun. And you had to bring an offering. Esme didn't work for free. I carried a jar of moonflower honey, rare, precious, harvested from the hives I kept at the sanctuary during lunar eclipses. Esme had a sweet tooth, and she'd been my secret ally for the past 2 years. Ever since I'd stumbled onto her cabin while tracking a wounded wolf and discovered that witches were very much real. She was waiting on her porch when I emerged from the tree line, a tiny woman with silver hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. She looked about 60, though she'd once told me she'd stopped counting after her 200th birthday. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting. Thanks. You look like you haven't brushed your hair in a week. She cackled at that, delighted. Esme appreciated honesty, said it was the rarest currency in a world full of liars and politicians. Come in, wolf girl. Tell me what's driven you up my mountain. Inside, her cabin was cluttered with herbs and crystals and books so old they looked like they might crumble to dust if you breathed on them. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild weather. Something bubbled in a cauldron, soup probably, though with Esme you could never be certain. I set the honey on her table and told her everything. Dominic's visit, his lies, the conversation I'd overheard, the curse, the prophecy, his plans to use me as breeding stock. Esme listened without interrupting, her storm cloud eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Tell me again, she said finally, the exact words his beta used. About the prophecy. I closed my eyes, pulling the memory forward. The prophecy is confirmed. Only your true mate's bloodline can break the curse. The child must be born of the bloodline. Esme leaned forward. Not just the mate, the bloodline. What's the difference? She stood abruptly and crossed to a bookshelf that took up an entire wall. Her fingers traced the spines of ancient volumes, searching. The Lycan king's curse is old magic. Very old. Older than his family's claim to the throne. How old? She pulled out a book bound in leather so dark it was almost black. Do you know the story of the original Luna, wolf girl? Something stirred in my chest. My wolf, lifting her head with sudden interest. The first she-wolf. The one the moon goddess blessed at the beginning of our kind. Blessed. Esme snorted. Cursed, more like. The moon goddess gave her power beyond imagining. The ability to create or destroy, to heal or harm, to bless the worthy and damn the wicked. And what did the first Lycans do with this gift? She slammed the book on the table. They feared her, hunted her, tried to steal her power through forced matings and blood rituals. My stomach turned. What happened to her? She disappeared. Hid herself and her descendants so thoroughly that most wolves forgot her bloodline ever existed. Esme opened the book to a page covered in symbols I didn't recognize. But her blood didn't disappear. It's been passed down through the generations, dormant, waiting, usually through the wolves that other packs discarded. The ones they called cursed. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. Esme, when you first came to me, Sarah, I told you that your power was unusual. That your wolf had abilities I'd never seen before. You said I was probably a late bloomer. I lied. She looked at me with something like wonder in her ancient eyes. I suspected then, but I wasn't certain until now. You're not just any moonless wolf, child. You're the last living descendant of the original Luna. I sat down hard. My wolf was pacing now, restless, and I could feel something stirring in my blood. Something that had always been there, sleeping, waiting to be acknowledged. The prophecy Dominic's chasing, I managed. It's not just about any true mate. It's about you. Esme turned the book toward me. The Varan family has been cursed for 300 years. Punishment for what their ancestors did to the original Luna's descendants. Each generation, the firstborn son weakens and dies unless the curse is broken. And the only way to break it is through my bloodline. Your child, specifically. Born of the original bloodline and the Varan blood that cursed it. She tapped the page. But here's what your arrogant king doesn't know. The prophecy has a second part. I leaned forward. What second part? Esme's smile was sharp as a blade. The child of the original bloodline will either save the Lycan king, or destroy his entire kingdom. Two possible futures, wolf girl. And which one comes to pass depends entirely on how the mother is treated. The fire crackled. Outside, a crow cawed. He thinks he can use me and throw me away, I said slowly, understanding dawning. But if he does, his kingdom burns. Esme closed the book. The curse isn't just about producing an heir. It's about choice, about worthiness. If the original bloodline is honored, cherished, chosen freely, salvation. If it's exploited, used, discarded. She drew a finger across her throat. I thought about Dominic kneeling on my porch, about the lies dripping from his lips like honey, about his plan to reject me again once he had what he needed. Does he know? I asked. About the second part? The Varan family has been searching for the original bloodline for centuries, but they only have half the prophecy. The other half was hidden by the witches who first recorded it. Insurance against exactly this kind of manipulation. Esme's eyes glittered. No one has the full prophecy except my coven. And now you. I sat back, mind reeling. All those years I'd thought I was cursed. Moonless, powerless, unworthy. All those years other wolves had looked at me with pity or contempt. And the whole time, I'd been carrying power that could topple kingdoms. What do? I asked. Esme reached across the table and took my hands. Her fingers were cool and dry like paper. You're already doing it, child. That sanctuary of yours. You think it was an accident that you gathered so many rejected wolves under your protection. They needed help. I wanted to give them somewhere safe. You wanted to give them what no one gave you. A home, purpose, a second chance. She squeezed my hands. Do you know what you've actually built? I thought about Moonhaven, about the 53 wolves currently living under my care. Not just rejected mates, we had former pack warriors exiled for disobedience. Healers cast out for questioning their alphas. Young wolves orphaned by border disputes that the great Lycan king couldn't be bothered to resolve. An army, I breathed. Esme smiled. An army of the discarded and forgotten. Wolves who owe their loyalty to you and no one else. Wolves who have every reason to want the current power structure burned to the ground. She released my hands. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Sarah. She sent you into exile so you could build something the corrupt courts never saw coming. Dominic arrived at exactly 7 o'clock the next evening, because of course he did. Kings were always punctual when they wanted something. I spent the day preparing. Not the cottage. I deliberately left it modest, comfortable, nothing like the gilded halls he was used to. No, I'd prepared myself. My mask. My performance. He knocked, and I opened the door to find him standing there in casual clothes for once. Dark jeans. A gray sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He looked almost normal. Almost humble. In his hands he held a single white rose. You said no expensive gifts, he said, offering it. This is from my mother's garden. She doesn't know I took it. She wouldn't approve of me being here. A nice touch, implying he was defying his family for me. I almost admired the craftsmanship of the lie. Come in. I stepped aside, taking the rose. The scent was sweet, delicate. completely at odds with the woman who'd cultivated it. Dominic's mother had made my life hell during the brief months I'd spent at court before the rejection. He walked into my cottage like he was entering a temple, his golden eyes taking in every detail: the worn couch, the handmade quilts, the photos on the mantel of me with my rescued wolves, the complete absence of anything royal or refined. "It's beautiful," he said, and he almost sounded like he meant it. "Sit down. Dinner's almost ready." I'd made a simple meal: roast chicken, vegetables from my garden, bread I'd baked that morning. Nothing fancy. I wanted to see how he handled it, this king who'd never eaten anything that wasn't prepared by professional chefs. He ate every bite, complimented every dish, helped clear the plates without being asked. "The sanctuary," he said as we settled on the couch with glasses of wine. "How many wolves do you have here now?" 53. "That many?" His surprise seemed genuine. I had no idea the problem was so widespread. I wanted to laugh. The problem he was referring to, rejected wolves with nowhere to go, was largely created by the policies his own court enforced. But I just smiled and said, "Most of them have nowhere else to turn. The pack system doesn't leave much room for those who don't fit." "No." He looked down at his wine. "No, I suppose it doesn't." We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the pressures of ruling, the impossible expectations, the loneliness of the crown. I told him carefully edited stories about building the sanctuary, about the wolves I'd helped, about the life I'd created without him. He was good at this, I realized. The false intimacy, the vulnerable confessions, the way he leaned in when I spoke like my words were the most important thing in the world. 3 years ago, I would have melted, would have believed every tender glance and softened word. Now I just cataloged his techniques for future reference. "I should go," he said finally, standing. "I don't want to overstay my welcome. Thank you for coming." He paused at the door, and his hand came up to cup my cheek. I forced myself not to flinch. "I'm going to earn your trust back, Sarah." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "However long it takes, whatever I have to do. I'm not the man who rejected you. I swear it." I held his gaze, letting him see what he wanted to see: vulnerability, lingering hurt, the first trembling hints of hope. "We'll see," I whispered. He left with a smile on his face, thinking he'd taken the first step toward his victory. I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the mountain road. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Elena. "How did it go?" she asked. "He thinks he's winning." "And the prophecy?" I thought about what Esme had told me, about the power sleeping in my blood, about the choice that would determine whether Dominic's kingdom stood or fell. "The prophecy says his child with me will either save him or destroy everything he's built." I smiled at my reflection in the dark glass. "And which one happens depends entirely on how he treats me." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, "So if he goes through with his plan to use you and reject you again, he won't just lose the cure to his curse." I watched the last of his taillights vanish into the darkness. "He'll lose everything." The game had begun. And Dominic Varon had no idea he'd already made the move that would cost him his kingdom. Chapter 3. The invitation arrived 3 days after our dinner, delivered by a royal courier who looked deeply uncomfortable standing on the porch of my modest cottage. "His Majesty King Dominic Varon requests the honor of your presence at a formal reconciliation ceremony to be held at the royal palace on the evening of the next full moon. Your attendance would signal to the court and kingdom your willingness to consider renewed bonds of mateship." I read it twice, then looked at the courier. A young wolf barely out of his teens, sweating despite the cool mountain air. "He wants me to come back to the palace," I said flatly. The courier swallowed. "His Majesty believes a public gesture would help smooth the path toward reconciliation, my lady." My lady. 3 years ago, the palace staff had called me far worse things when they thought no one was listening. Half-breed. Gutter wolf. The king's embarrassment. "Tell His Majesty I'll be there." Relief flooded the young wolf's face. He bowed so deeply I thought he might tip over, then practically sprinted back to his car. I watched him go, the invitation crumpling slightly in my grip. Elena appeared at my shoulder. You're actually going? Of course I am. To the palace. Where they humiliated you. Where his mother probably still has your picture on a dartboard. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Dominic wants me where he can control the narrative. Where his court can watch him play the reformed king and me play the grateful mate. I tucked the invitation into my pocket. But he forgets. I know that palace better than he thinks. I spent months there before the rejection, invisible and ignored. Staff talk around people they consider beneath them. So you're walking into a trap. I'm walking into an opportunity. I headed inside to start packing. Call Esme. Tell her I need everything she can find on the Varon family's research into the original Luna. If Dominic knows what I am, and he must, if the prophecy led him to me, then there's evidence somewhere in that palace. I intend to find it. The royal palace rose from the heart of Lycan territory like a monument to excess. White marble towers, gold leaf domes, gardens that sprawled across 50 acres of manicured perfection. It had been built 3 centuries ago, when the Varon family first seized power, and every generation since had added their own ostentatious touches. I'd hated it from the moment I first arrived. All that wealth, all that splendor, while wolves in the outer territories starved. My car, a sensible sedan that looked comically out of place among the luxury vehicles in the palace courtyard, drew stares from the staff as I pulled up. A valet approached with barely concealed disdain, then recognition flickered across his face. Lady Sarah, he said my name like it tasted sour. Welcome back to the palace. Just Sarah, I corrected, handing him my keys. I'm not a lady of anything. I dressed carefully for this visit. Not in the fine gowns I'd worn during my brief time at court. Desperate to fit in. Desperate to prove I belonged at Dominic's side. No, today I wore simple black, elegant but understated. The clothing of a woman who had nothing to prove. The palace doors opened, and there he was. Dominic descended the grand staircase like something out of a fairy tale. All golden eyes and broad shoulders and perfectly tailored suit. His smile when he saw me was warm, welcoming, utterly convincing. Sarah. He took my hands and pressed a kiss to each one. You came. You asked. I hoped. He tucked my arm through his, guiding me inside. The ceremony isn't until tomorrow evening, but I wanted you to have time to settle in. Reacquaint yourself with the palace. His thumb stroked absently over my wrist, a gesture of casual intimacy. Your old rooms have been prepared. My old rooms. The cramped suite in the east wing where they'd stashed me like an unwanted guest, as far from Dominic's quarters as possible while still being technically in the same building. How thoughtful, I murmured. We walked through corridors I remembered too well, past the ballroom where he'd rejected me, past the gallery hung with portraits of Varon kings and their perfect, noble-blooded queens, past servants who stopped and stared and whispered behind their hands. And then we rounded a corner, and I saw her. She was beautiful, I'd give her that. Tall and willowy, with platinum hair that fell in perfect waves and ice-blue eyes that cut like diamonds. Her gown was blood-red silk, designed to make every other woman in the room look dowdy by comparison. And the way she looked at Dominic, proprietary, possessive, certain of her place, told me exactly who she was before anyone spoke her name. Dominic, darling. She glided toward us, ignoring me completely. I've been looking everywhere for you. Vivian. Something flickered across Dominic's face. Annoyance? Warning? I'm showing Sarah to her rooms. Vivian's gaze finally landed on me, and her perfect lips curved into a smile that was all teeth. Ah, the rejected mate. She said it the way one might say the stray dog or the embarrassing relative. How brave of you to show your face here again. Lady Vivian. I kept my voice pleasant. I've heard so much about you. Have you? She stepped closer, and her perfume, expensive, cloying, filled my nose. I hope it was all accurate. I'd hate for you to be operating under any misconceptions about the situation. Dominic's hand tightened on my arm. Vivian. It's fine. I smiled at her, letting her see nothing but mild indifference. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get acquainted. Vivian's eyes narrowed. She'd expected me to crumble, I realized, to stammer and blush and shrink away from her obvious superiority. The old Sarah might have. This Sarah simply found her unimaginative. The reconciliation ceremony. Vivian turned back to Dominic, effectively dismissing me. I assume I'm still to be seated at the high table. We'll discuss seating arrangements later. But darling, later, Vivian. Something ugly flashed in her ice blue eyes, but she controlled it quickly. Of course, we'll speak tonight. She pressed a kiss to Dominic's cheek, lingering, deliberate, marking her territory. Then she swept past us without another glance at me. Dominic waited until her footsteps faded before speaking. I apologize for that. For what? Your mistress being territorial. I extracted my arm from his grip. I knew what I was walking into. She's not. He stopped, reconsidered. It's complicated. It usually is. I started walking again, forcing him to follow. My rooms. He caught up in 2 strides, and I could feel his gaze on the side of my face, searching for damage, looking for cracks in my armor. I gave him nothing. She won't be a problem, he said. I'll make sure of it. Don't trouble yourself on my account. Sarah. Which way? He led me to the East Wing in silence. The formal dinner that night was a battlefield disguised as a meal. 40 wolves of the highest nobility, arranged around a table so long you could barely see from one end to the other. Crystal chandeliers, gold-rimmed plates, 7 courses of food so artfully arranged it seemed a shame to eat it. I'd been seated far from Dominic, near the foot of the table, among minor nobles and visiting dignitaries who'd drawn the short straws. Vivian, of course, sat at his right hand, draped in emeralds and triumph. She started in before the soup course was finished. Tell me, Sarah. Her voice carried beautifully, designed to draw attention. How is your little sanctuary? Is that what you call it? Heads turned. Conversations quieted. I set down my spoon with deliberate care. Moonhaven is thriving. Thank you for asking. How noble of you, taking in all those broken wolves. Vivian's smile dripped poison. Though I suppose you'd have a special sympathy for the rejected, wouldn't you? Having such personal experience with the condition. Scattered laughter from her sycophants. I kept my expression neutral, waiting. I've always wondered, she continued, clearly warming to her audience, what it must be like to stand before your fated mate and hear him declare you unworthy. To know that even the bond the moon goddess blessed couldn't overcome your fundamental inadequacy. She sipped her wine. However do you recover from such a thing? I looked past her to Dominic. He was watching us, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Our eyes met. Say something, I thought. Defend me. Prove you've changed even slightly from the man who let his court tear me apart 3 years ago. He looked away. My wolf stirred, but I kept her leashed. This was valuable information. This was Dominic showing me exactly who he still was beneath the pretty apologies and tender gestures. You recover, I said to Vivian, loud enough for the table to hear, by building something real, something that matters. Something that helps others instead of just serving your own vanity. I smiled pleasantly. You should try it sometime. Vivian's face went rigid. She opened her mouth to respond. I find I've lost my appetite, I announced, rising from my seat. If you'll excuse me. I walked out without waiting for permission. Let them whisper. Let them think they'd wounded me. It served my purposes better if they underestimated me. And it gave me exactly the excuse I needed to explore. I knew the palace's bones better than its residents realized. During those awful months before the rejection, when I'd been invisible and ignored, I'd wandered its corridors endlessly. The staff never bothered to monitor where I went. They assumed I was too stupid or timid to find anything interesting. They'd been wrong. I slipped through a servant's passage and made my way to the West Wing, where the royal family kept their private archives. The corridor was dark and empty, Everyone was still at dinner, but I moved carefully anyway, keeping my footsteps silent. The archive door was locked, but palace locks hadn't been updated in decades. A hairpin and 30 seconds of patience got me inside. Moonlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating row after row of ancient shelves. Tax records, land surveys, correspondence from centuries of Varan rule. I'd need weeks to go through it all properly. But I wasn't looking for records. I was looking for secrets. Esme had told me to look for hidden spaces. Old families always have hidden spaces, she'd said. Places where they keep the things they don't want found. I traced my fingers along the walls, searching for irregularities. Past shelves of crumbling documents. Past a cabinet full of ceremonial objects. Past a portrait of the first Varan king. His golden eyes so like Dominic's. The portrait was hinged. My heart hammering, I pressed its edge. Something clicked, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow chamber beyond. Inside, I found horrors. The room was small, barely bigger than a closet, and every surface was covered with papers. Charts and diagrams. Family trees with certain names circled in red. Maps tracking bloodlines across centuries. And at the center of it all, a word written over and over. Original. I rifled through the documents with shaking hands. Research into the original Luna and her descendants. Theories about dormant power. Lists of women who might carry the bloodline. Most with deceased written next to their names. Most with terminated written next to their names. My eyes caught on a letter, the handwriting formal and precise. Your Majesty. The Blackwood woman has been dealt with as ordered. The infant presented a complication. The prophecy suggests the bloodline must continue for the curse to be breakable. But we have contained her among a pack far from court. By the time she's old enough to matter, her moonless status will ensure she's rejected from any position of power. The bloodline is neutralized. Your servant, Lord Commander Valen. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. The Blackwood woman. My mother. My mother's name had been Elara Blackwood. Has been dealt with as ordered. Dominic's father. The previous king. He'd ordered my parents killed. I found more letters. A whole stack of them chronicling years of surveillance on the original bloodline. They'd tracked my mother from birth, waiting to see if she'd manifest power. When she hadn't, when she'd seemed like just another ordinary wolf, they'd relaxed. Let her live. Let her mate. Let her have a child. And then someone had discovered the prophecy's full implications. And the order had come down. Eliminate the threat. Preserve the bloodline only in a controllable form. A controllable form. A moonless wolf. A rejected, broken thing that would come crawling back when they needed her. Me. They'd killed my parents and let me live because they'd already planned to use me. Decades before Dominic ever knelt on my porch. His family had decided my fate. My whole life. Everything I'd suffered. The orphanage, the cruelty, the rejection, all of it engineered. All of it designed to keep me weak and desperate until they needed what ran in my veins. Sarah. I spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway of the hidden room, his face pale in the darkness. His eyes moved from my face to the papers clutched in my hands, and something shifted in his expression. How much did you read? Enough. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Your father murdered my parents. I didn't know. He stepped into the room, hands raised like I was a wild animal he was trying not to spook. I swear to you I didn't know about that part. Not until after. After what? After you rejected me? I laughed and it was an ugly sound. You knew what I was before you ever met me. Didn't you? You knew about the original bloodline. You knew about the prophecy. He didn't deny it. I was afraid of you, so you humiliated me instead. Destroyed me publicly. Made sure I'd be so broken that when you finally came calling, I'd have no choice but to say yes. No. He moved closer, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Anguish. Real anguish, cracking through his carefully maintained mask. You don't understand what's coming, Sarah. You don't understand what I've been trying to. What you've been trying to do. Use me as a broodmare? Your beta made that very clear. Dominic froze. You heard that conversation. Every word. For a long moment we just stared at each other. The rejected mate and the king who'd destroyed her. The pawn and the player who thought he controlled the board. Then his mask crumbled completely, and the man underneath looked terrified. You don't understand, he whispered. The curse isn't just killing me. It's spreading, weakening every wolf with Varan blood in their veins. If I die without breaking it, thousands of innocent Lycans die with me. My sisters, my cousins, children, Sarah. Children who never did anything wrong. So break it another way. There is no other way. His voice cracked. Don't you think I've looked? Don't you think I've spent years trying to find any option that didn't involve dragging you back into this nightmare? I don't believe you. I know. He closed his eyes. I know you don't. I know I've given you no reason to. But there's more happening here than you realize. Forces moving against both of us that. An alarm shattered the silence. Screaming, electronic, cutting through the palace like a blade. Dominic's head snapped toward the door. That's the breach alarm. Breach! The palace is under attack. He ran. After a moment's hesitation, I followed, because whatever was happening, being caught alone in a hidden room full of evidence wasn't where I wanted to be. We emerged into chaos. Wolves running everywhere, some in human form, some already shifted. Guards shouting orders. Somewhere nearby, glass shattered with a tremendous crash. Rogue Lycans! Someone screamed. They've breached the east wall. Dominic shifted mid-stride, his wolf enormous and black as midnight, and bounded toward the fighting. I ran after him, still in human form, my heart pounding. The eastern garden was a war zone. A dozen rogue wolves, scarred, feral, eyes wild with bloodlust, had broken through the ornamental fence and were tearing through the guests who hadn't made it inside. I saw blood on white marble, heard screams cut short, and in the middle of it all, cornered against a fountain, a group of young wolves, children, a nanny trying desperately to shield them with her own body. 3 rogues circled them, closing in. Dominic was on the other side of the garden, fighting 2 attackers at once. The guards were overwhelmed. No one was close enough to reach the children in time. Except me. I didn't think. Didn't plan. I just ran toward them, some desperate instinct driving me forward. The nearest rogue saw me coming and lunged, jaws snapping for my throat, and something inside me broke open. Felt like sunrise, like the first moment of spring after endless winter, like every locked door in my soul swinging wide at once. Power flooded through me, ancient, terrible, glorious power that had been sleeping in my blood since the day I was born. Light exploded from my skin. The rogue that had lunged for me was thrown backward, slamming into a marble pillar with a crack that echoed across the garden. The other 2 circling the children yelped and scattered, temporarily blinded. But I couldn't stop it. The power kept coming, pouring out of me in waves that I didn't know how to control. I heard gasps and screams. From the rogues, from the guards, from everyone who had turned to stare at the impossible thing happening in their midst. A moonless wolf, radiating power like a small sun. I managed to aim it away from the children, away from the innocents, channeled it somehow toward the attackers, toward the rogues who had come to kill and destroy. They fell back, whimpering, unable to approach. And then, as quickly as it had risen, the power receded. I collapsed to my knees on the blood-stained grass, shaking violently. The garden had gone silent. I looked up to find every eye fixed on me. Wolves frozen mid-fight. Guards with mouths hanging open. Nobility who had emerged from the palace staring like they'd witnessed a miracle or a monster. Maybe both. Dominic had shifted back to human form and was standing 20 feet away, breathing hard. His expression as he looked at me was impossible to read. And beyond him, in the shadows at the edge of the garden, I saw figures watching. Not rogues, something else. Wolves in dark clothing who hadn't participated in the attack, who seemed to have been waiting for exactly this moment. They'd seen everything. One of them pulled out a phone, spoke briefly, then disappeared into the darkness with the others. The nanny I'd saved was sobbing, clutching the children close. "The original," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The original Luna. She's returned." The words spread through the crowd like wildfire. Whispered, shouted, repeated in tones of awe and fear. My secret was out. Every ally and enemy of the Varan crown now knew exactly what I was. And as Dominic pushed through the crowd toward me, his face pale and grim, I realized the game had changed entirely. There was no more hiding. No more playing the wounded mate considering reconciliation. Whatever came next, I would face it as what I truly was. The last daughter of the original Luna. And my power had only just begun to wake. Chapter 4. I woke in silk sheets that weren't mine, in a room I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought I was back in my cottage at Moonhaven, the morning light filtering through my worn curtains. Then I shifted, and every muscle in my body screamed in protest. Memory came flooding back. The hidden room, the attack, the power that had erupted from somewhere deep inside me. The power that everyone had seen. I sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. My head swam, my vision blurring at the edges. A cool hand pressed against my shoulder, easing me back down. Slowly, Elena's voice, familiar and worried. "You've been unconscious for almost 2 days. Elena." I blinked until her face came into focus. "How are you here?" "Dominic sent for me after the attack. Apparently, the palace healers were too terrified to touch you." Her mouth twisted. Something about not wanting to anger the original Luna. I closed my eyes. So it was real. All of it. The power, the revelation, the horrified faces of the court as they watched me become something other than the broken reject they'd dismissed. "Where am I?" "The Queen's chambers." Elena's voice carried a note of dark humor. "Dominic had you moved here while you were unconscious. Said it was the most secure room in the palace. Or the hardest to escape from." "That too." I forced myself to sit up again. Slower this time. The room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings, walls covered in tapestries depicting wolf hunts and lunar ceremonies. A fireplace big enough to roast an ox. The bed I was lying in could have fit 6 people comfortably. This was the room meant for Dominic's queen. The room I dreamed of occupying during those naive months before the rejection. Now it felt like a gilded cage. "I need to leave," I said. "You need to rest." "Elena, your power almost killed you, Sarah." Her green eyes were fierce. "Whatever happened in that garden, it drained you completely. The palace physician said he's never seen anything like it. Your body temperature dropped to near-fatal levels. Your heart stopped twice." Her voice cracked. "I almost lost you." I reached for her hand, squeezed it. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't do it again until we understand what we're dealing with." A knock at the door. Elena's expression hardened. "He's been coming every few hours," she said. "I've turned him away each time, but he's getting insistent. Let him in." "Sarah, I need answers." "He has them." I straightened against the pillows, pulling the blankets up to my shoulders. "Let him in." Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my face stopped her. She crossed to the door and opened it just wide enough to speak through. "She's awake. She'll see you. But if you upset her, I'll poison your next meal and make it look like food allergies." "Noted." Dominic's voice, rough and tired. He entered the room like a man approaching an execution. Dark circles shadowed his golden eyes. His clothes were rumpled, his hair uncombed. I'd never seen him look less like a king. "Leave us," I said to Elena. "I'll be right outside." She shot Dominic a warning glare before slipping through the door. We stared at each other across the expanse of the Queen's chambers. The last time we'd been alone, I'd been holding evidence of his family's crimes while alarms screamed around us. "You look terrible," I said. "I haven't slept since the attack." He moved closer, then seemed to think better of it, stopping at the foot of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been turned inside out and put back together wrong." I watched his face carefully. Tell me about the attack. Sarah, you said I didn't understand what was coming. You said there were forces moving against both of us. I kept my voice flat, controlled. The attack wasn't random, was it? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the palace grounds where the battle had taken place. The Lycan Council isn't what most wolves think it is, he said finally. On the surface, they're advisors, elders who help guide the king's decisions. But within the council, there's a faction, corrupt, power-hungry, and very old. They've been manipulating Lycan politics for centuries. And they orchestrated the attack. Yes. He turned to face me. They want you dead before you can bear an heir. The prophecy frightens them. A child of the original bloodline wouldn't just break my curse. It would shift the balance of power entirely. They'd lose control. So they sent rogues to kill me, to test your power, to see if the rumors were true. His jaw tightened. They got their answer. I thought about the figures I'd seen watching from the shadows. The phone call made before they disappeared. They know what I am now. Everyone knows. Dominic moved to a chair near the bed and sank into it like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. Word has spread across all 7 territories. The original Luna has returned. Some wolves are celebrating. Others are terrified. The council faction is scrambling to regroup. And what are you doing? Trying to keep you alive long enough to explain everything. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You deserve the full truth, Sarah. All of it. Even the parts that make me a monster. I waited. The curse on my bloodline is older than the palace, he began. 300 years ago, my ancestor, the first Varen king, did something unforgivable. He captured a witch, tortured her for her power. When she wouldn't submit, he killed her children in front of her. His voice was hollow. With her dying breath, she cursed his entire line. Every firstborn son would slowly go mad, their wolf turning against them, until they died in agony before their 40th birthday. The curse you're dying from now. Yes, but there was a way to break it. The witch knew about the original Luna's bloodline, knew that it carried the power to undo even the darkest magic. So she wove a possibility into the curse. A child born of Varen blood and original blood could break it forever. He paused. Or, if that child was raised in hatred, in pain, in vengeance, it could be used to destroy every wolf descended from Varen. Thousands of innocent lives, Sarah. My sisters, my cousins, children who had no part in my ancestors' crimes. I absorbed this in silence. The weight of it pressed against my chest. The council's corrupt faction has been hunting the original bloodline for centuries, Dominic continued. When they finally identified your mother as a carrier, they panicked. Some wanted to force her to breed with a Varen, create the child under their control. Others wanted her dead, afraid of the prophecy's destructive potential. My father, he swallowed. My father chose the middle ground. Eliminate the parents. Raise the child in obscurity where her power would never awaken. Keep her weak, desperate, controllable. Use her only when necessary. And you knew all of this. Not all of it. Not at first. He met my eyes, and I saw something raw there. Something that looked almost like shame. I was told about the prophecy when I was 16. Told that my future mate had been identified, that she was being raised far from court for her own protection. I believed it, Sarah. I was young and stupid, and I believed my parents were protecting you. When did you learn the truth? The night before our mating ceremony. His hands clenched into fists. My father called me into his study and explained everything. What they'd done to your parents. How they'd deliberately kept you isolated and powerless. And what the council planned to do once you were officially mated to me. My wolf stirred, sensing where this was going. I kept her quiet. What did they plan? To keep you pregnant continuously until you produced a viable heir. To treat you as breeding stock. Just as I said to Marcus that night outside your cottage. His voice broke. But that wasn't my plan, Sarah. That was what the council faction demanded. If I didn't comply, they threatened to take you by force, to chain you in a dungeon somewhere and use you until your body gave out. I felt sick. So your solution was to publicly humiliate me? My solution was to make you worthless to them. He stood abruptly, pacing. If I rejected you, publicly, brutally, in a way that left no doubt, the council would have no use for you. A rejected mate can't bear a proper heir. The bond is severed. You'd be damaged goods in their eyes, not worth the trouble of hunting down. You let me believe I was nothing. The words came out sharp as glass. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I spent months wanting to die, Dominic. Months believing the whole world was right about me. That I was worthless, unlovable, cursed. I know. You could have told me. You could have explained. Let me make my own choice. And you would have done what? Fought beside me against an enemy you didn't know existed? Been brave and noble and gotten yourself killed within a month. He rounded on me, something wild in his eyes. I was 23 years old, Sarah. I just learned that everything I believed about my family was a lie, that my future mate's parents had been murdered on my father's orders, and that a shadow council wanted to use you as a broodmare or kill you trying. I had maybe 6 hours to come up with a plan that would keep you alive, and public rejection was the only thing I could think of. You chose my suffering over my partnership. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stopped pacing, his whole body going still. Yes, he said quietly. I made a choice for you instead of with you. I decided that your pain was acceptable if it meant your survival. And I have hated myself for it every single day since. I wanted to feel vindicated. Wanted to wrap myself in righteous anger and use it as armor. But something else was stirring beneath my fury. An exhausted kind of grief. For the girl I'd been. For the future we might have had if he'd trusted me enough to fight beside me instead of trying to protect me through cruelty. Why come back now? I asked. Why the charade about needing my forgiveness? Because the plan failed. He slumped back into the chair. The curse is killing me faster than anyone predicted. And the council faction figured out that you still carry the original bloodline regardless of the rejection. They've spent the last 3 years searching for you. When they finally tracked you to Moonhaven, I had to reach you first. The conversation I overheard was for Marcus's benefit. He reports everything to the council. If I'd shown up at your door talking about prophecies and bloodlines and ancient curses, you'd have been dead within the week. His laugh was bitter. I had to make them think I was still playing their game, using you like they wanted. It was the only way to buy time. Time for what? Time to figure out how to kill them all. The words hung in the air between us. I studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation. All I saw was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in years. I don't know if I believe you, I said finally. I know. I don't know if it matters whether I believe you. You still made choices that destroyed me. Whatever your reasons, whatever noble sacrifice you thought you were making, you broke something that can't be fixed with explanations. I know that too. I pushed the blankets aside and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My body protested, muscles shaking, but I forced myself to stand. Where are your healers? I asked. Down the hall. Why? Because I need to know something, and I need medical confirmation. He frowned but didn't argue, just moved to the door and called for the palace physician. A nervous gray-haired wolf who looked like he expected me to incinerate him on sight. I need you to examine me, I told him. Specifically, I need you to check if I'm pregnant. Dominic went rigid. The physician looked between us, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. My lady, given the trauma you've experienced, a full examination would be. Do it. He did. 10 minutes later, he stepped back from the bed with an expression of utter bewilderment. You're pregnant, he said, approximately 3 years along. That's impossible. Dominic's voice was strangled. There was never. But I remembered. One moment on the night before our mating ceremony, when we'd been alone in the gardens. He'd taken my hand. Our eyes had met. Something had sparked between us, the mate bond trying to establish itself. It had lasted only seconds before he'd pulled away, but I'd felt it. Connection. A beginning. A child. The life has been dormant, the physician continued, clearly struggling to understand what he was seeing. Suspended in an embryonic state. It appears to have activated when your powers awakened. I've never seen anything like it. 3 years. I'd been carrying potential life for 3 years without knowing it. Waiting, sleeping, until the original Luna's power finally woke inside me. Get out, I said to the physician. Both of you. Now. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. He ushered the trembling physician out and closed the door behind them. I sat alone in the Queen's chambers, my hand pressed against my stomach, trying to process the impossible. I was pregnant with Dominic Varen's child. A child that could break the curse or destroy a kingdom. A child that the corrupt council wanted dead or controlled. A child that changed everything. 3 days passed before I felt strong enough to leave my room. Elena stayed with me, helping me eat, helping me process, running interference whenever Dominic or anyone else tried to push their way in. I needed time to think. Time to adjust to the new reality growing inside me. On the 4th day, Vivian made her move. She came under the guise of reconciliation, requesting an audience to clear the air. I agreed, curious what game she was playing. She arrived in pale blue silk, her platinum hair perfectly arranged, her smile as sharp as ever. Tea was served. A palace blend, bitter and expensive. I wanted to apologize, Vivian said, stirring honey into her cup. My behavior at dinner was inexcusable. I was threatened by your presence and I lashed out. Can you forgive me? I lifted my own cup but didn't drink. That's very gracious of you. I've had time to think. Whatever your history with Dominic, it's clear you're not here to steal him from me. You're a victim of circumstance, just like I am. She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim. Perhaps we could even be friends. Perhaps. She glanced at my untouched cup. Is the tea not to your liking? I'm not thirsty. Something flickered in her ice-blue eyes. Annoyance quickly masked. I insist you try it. The palace blend is really quite special. She pushed the cup toward me. I had them add a touch of moonflower honey, just for you. Moonflower honey. The same offering I'd brought to Esme's cottage. The same honey that, when mixed with certain compounds, became one of the most effective poisons for Lycan metabolisms. I lifted the cup to my lips, watching Vivian's face as I did. Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders relaxed slightly. I drank. The poison hit my system immediately, a burning sensation spreading from my throat to my chest, trying to stop my heart. I felt my body respond, felt the original Luna's power rise to meet the threat like antibodies swarming an infection. The burning faded. My heart kept beating. Interesting blend, I said, setting down the empty cup. Vivian had gone pale. That's not possible. What's not possible? I stood, and power crackled beneath my skin. Not the explosive force of the garden, but something controlled, deliberate. That your poison didn't work? That you thought you could kill the original Luna with something mixed into tea? How did you? No. I moved around the table, watching her scramble backward. I didn't. Not for certain. But you've been watching me since I arrived. You have spies everywhere. And when your physician friend suddenly requested access to my medical records yesterday, it wasn't hard to guess what information you'd bought. I stopped inches from her face. You know about the pregnancy. Vivian's composure shattered completely. That child should be mine. I've spent 5 years at his side, enduring his moods, his obsessions, his pathetic attachment to the memory of you. He was supposed to marry me. I was supposed to be queen. And instead, you'll be nothing. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the door. She fought me, clawing at my hand, but I was stronger now. The original Luna's power flowing through me, making me something more than I'd ever been. I threw open the door to find a crowd gathered in the hallway. Word of Vivian's visit had spread, apparently. Nobles, servants, and guards all staring as I dragged the king's mistress into the corridor. Dominic was there too, his face tight with alarm. Sarah, what? Your mistress just tried to poison me. I released Vivian, letting her stumble. She knows about the pregnancy. She bought the information from someone with access to my medical records. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vivian straightened, trying to salvage some dignity. She's lying. I would never. I raised my hand, and light gathered in my palm. Soft, controlled, unmistakably powerful. Would you like to continue that sentence? Because I can show everyone exactly what the original Luna does to wolves who try to harm her child. Vivian's mouth snapped shut. You're finished here, I said. Leave the palace. Leave the territory. If I ever see your face again, I'll burn you from the inside out. Dominic. Vivian turned to him desperately. Tell her she can't do this. You're nothing. Dominic's voice was cold. Final. You attempted to murder the mother of my heir. Be grateful she's letting you walk away. For a moment, Vivian looked like she might argue. Then she saw the expressions on the faces around her. The nobles who'd supported her, now backing away as if her disgrace were contagious. The guards who'd flirted with her, now gripping their weapons. The servants who'd feared her, now watching with barely concealed satisfaction. She fled without another word. The crowd parted for her, then closed ranks again, all eyes on me. I felt their fear, their awe, their desperate uncertainty about what I was and what I meant for their world. Dominic stepped toward me. Sarah, don't. I held up my hand, and he stopped. I let you explain. I listened to your truth. Now hear mine. The hallway had gone utterly silent. Every wolf present was frozen, waiting. I'm carrying your child, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The child of the original Luna's bloodline. The child your prophecy promises will either save your kingdom or destroy it. I know. His voice was rough. Sarah, we can figure this out together. We can. No, we can't. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the desperate hope in his golden eyes. The hope I was about to extinguish. You had a chance to be my partner, to trust me with the truth and let me choose my own fate. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to break me because it was easier than believing I could stand beside you. I was trying to protect. You were trying to control, just like your father, just like the council, just like everyone who's ever decided they knew what was best for the original bloodline. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the spark of life there. My child, my power, my future. This child will never be yours, I said quietly, and watched the words land like a killing blow. You lost that right when you chose to be my enemy instead of my mate. Whatever this child becomes, savior or destroyer, it will be my choice, my decision, and you will have no say in it. Sarah, please. I walked past him. The crowd parted like water, wolves pressing themselves against the walls to avoid my path. I didn't look back. Chapter 5. They came at dawn. I'd been expecting it. After publicly humiliating Vivian and declaring my child would never belong to Dominic, I knew the corrupt council faction would accelerate their plans. They couldn't afford to wait. Every day I grew stronger, more connected to the original Luna's power. Every day, more wolves heard the stories and started questioning the old order. I was standing at the window of the Queen's chambers when I saw them. Hundreds of rogues pouring over the palace walls like a dark tide. But they weren't alone. Mixed among the feral wolves were others in formal dress, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Council members. The corrupt faction had stopped pretending. Elena burst through the door. They're everywhere. The guards are overwhelmed. Sarah, we need to get you out. No. I was already moving, pulling on clothes, shoving my feet into boots. This ends today. You're pregnant. You nearly died using your power a week ago. You can't possibly. I sent word to Moonhaven 3 days ago. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the servants' passage I'd discovered during my explorations. They should be here soon. Who should be here? I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. My army. The palace had become a labyrinth of violence. We moved through back corridors and hidden passages, avoiding the worst of the fighting. Twice we encountered rogue wolves, feral, mindless things, and twice I put them down with bursts of light that left them unconscious on the marble floors. The power came easier now. Still exhausting, still dangerous, but no longer the uncontrollable explosion it had been in the garden. I was learning my own strength. We emerged into the great hall to find chaos. Palace guards fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Nobles cowered behind overturned tables. And in the center of it all, Dominic's black wolf tore through attackers with savage efficiency. But even he was flagging. There were simply too many enemies. I saw the moment he spotted me. His wolf's golden eyes locked onto mine, and something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not even understanding. Just acknowledgement. We were both here. We would both fight. A howl split the air. Not from inside the palace, from beyond the walls. I ran to the nearest window and looked out. They were coming. Dozens of wolves, hundreds, streaming across the palace grounds. Not rogues, these wolves moved with purpose and coordination. And at their head, a massive gray wolf I recognized immediately. Marcus, Dominic's beta. For one terrible moment, I thought he'd betrayed us. Brought more enemies to finish what the rogues had started. Then I saw who ran beside him. Elena's mate, Thomas, who'd been exiled for questioning his alpha's orders. Jasper, a former palace guard dismissed for refusing to participate in a prisoner's torture. Miriam, a healer cast out of her pack for treating wolves her leaders had declared enemies. My wolves, the rejected ones, the broken ones, the wolves I'd gathered at Moonhaven and given a second chance. They hit the rogue lines like a thunderbolt. How? I breathed. Elena appeared at my shoulder. You're not the only one who can send messages. I contacted Moonhaven the day we arrived. Just in case. I could have kissed her. Come on. I grabbed her hand. We're not done yet. We fought our way through the great hall, toward the throne room where I somehow knew the real battle would be decided. The power of the original Luna sang in my blood, guiding me, showing me where I needed to be. The throne room doors hung open, torn from their hinges. Inside, I found what I'd expected. 5 figures in council robes, standing before the throne like they already owned it. And kneeling before them, bloody and beaten, was the wolf they'd meant to replace. King Harlan Varen, Dominic's father. Ah, the lead council member, a silver-haired wolf named Aldrich who'd smiled at me with false warmth during my brief time at court, turned at our entrance. The original Luna herself. How convenient. We'd hoped to kill you separately, but this is more efficient. Where's Dominic? Busy dying, I imagine. We sent our best assassins after him specifically. Aldrich gestured casually at the former king. His father was easier to capture. The old fool thought the council still served his interests. Harlan's eyes met mine. I saw fear there and recognition, and something that might have been guilt. You killed my parents, I said. A necessary precaution. He didn't even try to deny it. The original bloodline was too dangerous to leave unchecked. And now that bloodline is carrying your grandchild. Harlan flinched. Aldrich laughed. Which is precisely why you both need to die, Aldrich said. The prophecy is too unpredictable. Better to end the Varen line entirely and install leadership we can control. He snapped his fingers. The other council members shifted, their wolves emerging. Ancient, powerful, twisted by centuries of dark magic and corruption. I should have been afraid. I was pregnant, outnumbered, facing wolves who'd been accumulating power since before my grandmother was born. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. You've spent centuries manipulating, controlling, treating wolves like pieces on a game board, I said. You murdered my parents. You planned to use me as breeding stock. You've destroyed countless lives to maintain your grip on power. Light gathered around me, brighter than before, drawn from somewhere deep in my core. I am the last daughter of the original Luna. My voice resonated with power that wasn't entirely mine. something older, something that had been waiting for this moment. And I am done letting you decide anyone's fate. The council wolves lunged. I unleashed everything I had. The battle was brutal and brief. My power met theirs and overwhelmed it, not because I was stronger but because mine came from something pure. The original Luna had been blessed by the moon goddess herself. These wolves had built their strength on blood and suffering and betrayal. When the light of the goddess met the darkness of their corruption, there was no contest. For council members fell. Their wolves ripped from them, their bodies collapsing into unconsciousness. But Aldrich was old and cunning. He dodged my attack and came for me directly, jaws snapping for my throat. A black blur intercepted him. Dominic. He hit Aldrich mid-leap, and they crashed together in a tangle of fur and fangs. I saw blood, too much blood. Dominic was already wounded from whatever ambush he'd escaped. Every movement cost him, but he kept fighting, kept putting himself between me and danger. Aldrich got his jaws around Dominic's throat. No! I threw power without thinking, without aiming. Light slammed into Aldrich, tearing him away from Dominic, sending him crashing into the throne hard enough to splinter the ancient wood. He didn't get up. I ran to Dominic. He'd shifted back to human form. A bad sign. Wolves who couldn't maintain their shift were dying. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading across the marble floor. Dominic. I pressed my hands against the wound in his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Dominic, stay with me. His golden eyes flickered open. Sarah. His voice was a whisper. The baby. Is the baby? Fine. We're both fine. Because of you. Tears burned my eyes. You idiot. You absolute idiot. Why did you? Couldn't let him hurt you. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. Couldn't watch you die. Not again. His wolf stirred. I felt it. A shadow of the connection we'd once shared. And for the first time in 3 years, it spoke to mine. We always loved you. He was just too afraid to deserve you. The words broke something in me. All my rage, my righteous fury, my determination to make him suffer. It crumbled against the simple truth of a dying wolf's confession. Don't you dare, I said, pressing harder against his wound. Don't you dare die and leave me with that as your last words. That's not fair, Dominic. That's not. My power surged. Not the destructive force I'd used against the council. Something different, gentler. The original Luna's gift of healing. The ability to create and restore that I'd never fully understood. Light poured from my hands into his chest, seeking out the damage, knitting torn flesh, rebuilding what had been destroyed. I felt myself draining, felt my vision tunneling, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. I would not let hate define my choices. I would not let him die because I was too proud to save him. The wound closed. His breathing steadied. Color returned to his face. He looked up at me with something like wonder. You saved me. I didn't forgive you. My voice shook. I just refused to be the kind of person who lets someone die to prove a point. He reached up and touched my face, his fingers trembling. That's exactly who you are. It's who you've always been. I pulled away from his touch. Can you stand? The battle's not over. It was actually. By the time we emerged from the throne room, my wolves from Moonhaven had finished the work. The rogue forces were scattered or captured. The corrupt council members were in chains. The palace, though damaged, still stood. And in the great hall, surrounded by the wolves who'd once been called worthless, Marcus approached and knelt at my feet. The battle is won, my lady. Your orders. I looked around at the chaos and carnage. At the nobles peeking out from their hiding places, uncertain what the new order would look like. At Dominic's father, still alive but clearly broken. At Dominic himself, bloodied but standing, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Find every council member, corrupt or otherwise, I said. We need to separate those who participated in this conspiracy from those who were merely complicit through silence. And the conspirators? Trial. Public trial. Let the Lycan people see exactly what their leaders have been doing in their name. The trials lasted a week. Aldrich and 3 surviving council conspirators were executed for treason, not by my hand, but by the judgment of an assembly of representatives from all 7 territories. I wouldn't let this become about my vengeance. It had to be about justice. Harlan Varen was stripped of all titles and banished to a remote territory, to live out his days under constant guard. I wanted him dead. Every time I looked at him, I saw my parents' ghosts. But killing him would have made me into what I was trying to destroy. The new council was restructured with actual representation, not just noble families but wolves from common packs, from the territories that had been ignored for centuries. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was a beginning. Through it all, Dominic stood by my side. Not as king giving orders, he'd ceded most of his authority during the crisis, but as an advisor. A witness. A man trying to understand a world that no longer worked the way he'd been taught. When the last trial ended and the great hall finally emptied, he found me on the balcony overlooking the palace grounds. "It's over," he said. "It's starting." I kept my eyes on the horizon, where the sun was setting in shades of gold and crimson. "The hard part comes now. Building something better from the wreckage. I want to help. I know." He moved to stand beside me, careful to maintain distance. He'd learned that much, at least. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he said. "About how to make this right. And I want to offer you something. I don't want. Just listen. Please." I turned to face him. "I want to offer you the crown," he said. "Full co-rule. Equal power. Everything I have. Everything I am. It's yours if you want it." I'd expected something like this. A grand gesture, a dramatic offer. The reformed king trying to prove his worth through sacrifice. "No," he flinched. "Sarah, I don't want your crown. I don't want your power. I don't want anything from you except this." I pulled out a document I'd been drafting for days. Moonhaven. I want it recognized as an independent territory, answering to no king. A sovereign haven for wolves who need sanctuary. He took the document and read it slowly. "You want to leave. I want to build something of my own. Something that doesn't depend on your politics or your court or your attempts at redemption." I met his eyes. "You can spend the rest of your life trying to earn what you destroyed. That's your choice. But you'll do it without me as your queen, your mate, or your anything. What we might have been, that possibility died the day you rejected me. And our child." My hand moved instinctively to my stomach. "Will be raised in Moonhaven, in love and safety, without the weight of prophecies or expectations. Will I?" His voice caught. "Will I be allowed to know them?" I thought about that. About all the ways I could hurt him, all the justice I could claim by shutting him out completely. But that would make me into something I didn't want to become. "You can visit," I said finally, "weekly, as a guest in my territory, following my rules. You will have no authority over this child, no claim on their future. But you can be present if you earn that right through consistent, patient, actual change. That's more than I deserve. I know. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them." I looked at the sunset again. Every child deserves to know their father, even if that father has to spend the rest of his life becoming worthy of them. He signed the document without another word. 7 months later, I stood at the border of my territory, watching the king's car wind its way up the mountain road. My territory, Moonhaven, officially recognized as sovereign land, home to over 200 wolves now. We had farms, schools, a medical center. We had families, not just rejected mates, but wolves who'd chosen this place because they believed in what we were building. And in my arms, wrapped in a blanket my own mother had made before I was born, Elena had somehow tracked it down. My daughter slept. Luna. I'd named her for what we both were, children of the moon, bearers of its light. Dominic's car stopped at the border gate. He got out and waited there, as he always did, for permission to enter. He came every week. Never late, never presumptuous. He brought gifts, not expensive things but thoughtful ones. Books on early childhood development. Soft toys from craftswomen in the outer territories. Once, a blanket he'd knitted himself, lumpy and imperfect and somehow precious for that. "He's here," Elena said from beside me. "I see him. You could make him wait longer. It's cold." I could. I adjusted Luna in my arms and started down the path toward the gate. But that would be petty. Since when are you above petty? Since I decided I didn't want my daughter to learn that from me. I reached the gate and opened it. Dominic stepped through, his eyes going immediately to the bundle in my arms. "She's grown," he said softly. "Babies do that. Can I?" He stopped himself. Waited. No demands, no assumptions. I shifted Luna into his arms. He held her like she was made of glass and starlight. His golden eyes filling with tears he didn't bother to hide. Luna stirred, opened her own eyes, the same impossible gold, and studied the stranger with infant curiosity. "Hello, little one," Dominic whispered. I'm your father." Luna yawned, apparently unimpressed, and went back to sleep. I laughed despite myself. Dominic looked up at me. Wonder and grief and hope all tangled together in his expression. "Thank you," he said. "Don't make me regret it. Never. I swear to you, Sarah. Never again." He walked beside me back toward the settlement, our daughter cradled in his arms, and I tried not to notice how right it looked. How much it resembled the future we might have had if he'd made different choices all those years ago. But that future was gone. This was a different path, and I was still learning where it led. Epilogue, 5 years later. The throne room in Moonhaven looked nothing like the one in the royal palace. No marble, no gold, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Just warm wood and soft light and chairs arranged in a circle rather than facing a single seat of power. This was where we held our councils, representatives from every group in our community, making decisions together. The Moonless Queen. Luna announced proudly as I entered, using the title my people had given me with fierce, protective love. "Luna," I said, trying not to smile. "We've talked about this. I'm just Sarah to you. But you're the queen to everyone else." She crossed her arms, 5 years old and already arguing like a seasoned diplomat. "And I'm the princess. You're a little girl who needs to finish her breakfast before her lessons. What if I don't want to? Then you don't get to help me in the healing center this afternoon." She considered this trade-off, then sprinted back toward the dining hall, her golden eyes bright with the same fire I saw in the mirror every morning. She was magnificent and terrifying, and mine. Elena appeared with a stack of papers. "The king is at the border. He's early. He's been early every week for 5 years. At some point, you should adjust your expectations." I took the papers. Supply requests, medical reports, the ordinary administration of an extraordinary place, and headed for my office. "He can wait. He always does." Yes, he always did. 5 years of weekly visits. 5 years of patience and consistency and quiet devotion. Dominic had kept every promise he'd made at the border when Luna was born. No other women, and I'd had spies check in the early days when I was still waiting for him to prove me right about his nature. No demands. No attempts to leverage his position or his connection to Luna. Just a man showing up, week after week, trying to become someone worthy of the child he'd almost lost the right to know. The curse had been broken 3 years ago, not through force or prophecy or manipulation, but through choice. Luna had been old enough to understand, barely, when I'd explained what she was, what she could do. And she'd decided, in that simple way children have, that she didn't want the king who brought her cookies to be sick anymore. The healing had taken everything she had. She'd slept for 3 days afterward, and I'd nearly killed Dominic with my bare hands when I thought we'd lost her. But she'd woken up, hungry and imperious and completely unaware that she'd just saved thousands of lives with her choice. Her choice. Not mine, not Dominic's, not some ancient prophecy determining her fate. A child's decision made in love with no strings attached. That was how the curse was meant to be broken all along, I think. Not through blood or breeding or bondage, but through a child raised in genuine love and freedom, choosing compassion over vengeance. The original Luna would have understood. I spent an hour on the paperwork, then walked to the border. Dominic was waiting in his usual spot, a basket in his hands. Cookies, probably. Luna would be delighted. "You're early," I said. "You're beautiful." "That's not an answer." "I know." He fell into step beside me as we walked toward the settlement. "I wanted to ask you something." "You always do." We'd developed a rhythm over the years. He asked, I considered, I usually said no. He accepted the rejection without argument and came back the next week to try again. Slowly, incrementally, I'd allowed him closer. First, it was border visits only. Then he was allowed into the settlement during daylight hours. Then he was allowed to take Luna on supervised outings. Then the supervision became optional. Now he had dinner with us most weeks. Helped Luna with her lessons. Read her stories before bed while I stood in the doorway watching. Always watching. Never quite trusting. "I wanted to ask," he said, "if I might be allowed to stay past Luna's bedtime tonight." I stopped walking. "Why?" "Because I'd like to talk to you. Actually talk, not about Luna or the territory or political alliances." He met my eyes, and I saw the years in his face. The gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes. He'd aged since the curse broke, catching up with all the years the magic had stolen. "I'd like to sit with you by the fire and talk about nothing important. I'd like to know who you are now, not who you were when I destroyed you. You want to court me. I want to know you. Whatever comes after that, whatever you decide, I'll accept. But I've spent 5 years proving I can be patient. I'm not asking for forgiveness or absolution or a second chance at being your mate. I'm asking for a conversation." I thought about all the reasons to say no. All the ways he'd hurt me. All the walls I'd built to protect myself and Luna from ever being vulnerable to him again. Then I thought about Luna yesterday, asking why the king who brought cookies wasn't allowed to stay for story time. "One conversation," I said. "That's all." His smile was like sunrise. "That's all I ask." That night, after Luna was in bed, I found Dominic in my sitting room, building up the fire. It was strange, seeing him in this domestic space. For 5 years, I'd kept him at arm's length, always meeting in public areas, always with witnesses nearby. But Luna was asleep down the hall, and Elena was deliberately not in the house, and suddenly it was just us in the flickering firelight. "Tea?" I asked. "Please." I made 2 cups, handed him one, and sat in the chair across from his. Not close. Not quite as far as I could have been. "So," I said, "talk." He laughed softly. "I've rehearsed this for 5 years, and now I can't remember any of it." "Start anywhere." He was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I've been thinking about what you said, the day the council fell, that you refused to let hate define your choices. I remember. That's who you've always been, Sarah. Even when I gave you every reason to hate me, you healed me anyway. You let me know our daughter. You built something extraordinary instead of burning everything down." He looked at me. "I spent my whole life being taught that power meant control. And you've shown me it actually means having the strength to choose compassion." "That sounds like flattery." "It's the truth. I was raised to be a king, but you've become a better leader than I ever was. Your people love you. Not because they fear you, not because tradition demands it. They love you because you've given them something to believe in." I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from Dominic still felt like traps, even after all these years. "I don't want to be your king anymore," he continued. "I don't want to rule beside you or claim any authority over what you've built. I just want." He set down his tea, his hands unsteady. "I want to be the man who reads our daughter bedtime stories. I want to be someone you can talk to when the burden of leadership gets heavy. I want to earn a place in your life, whatever place you're willing to give me. And if that place is never what we might have been, then I'll take what I can get." He said it simply, without self-pity. "I destroyed the chance to be your mate, Sarah. I know that. I'm not trying to resurrect something that died. I'm trying to see if something new might grow in its place." The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, a wolf howled at the rising moon. I don't know if I can ever trust you completely, I said. There are parts of me that broke when you rejected me. Parts that healed wrong that might never heal at all. I know, but I'm tired of maintaining walls. I surprised myself with the admission. I'm tired of being vigilant every moment you're here, waiting for the betrayal I'm sure is coming. I know you haven't. 5 years without a single broken promise. It's more than I expected. I met his eyes. More than I let myself hope for. He didn't say anything. Just waited, patient as always, for whatever I would decide. Luna asked why you can't stay for story time. I said. What did you tell her? That some things take time. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moon. She's reading chapter books now. The Enchanted Forest series, about a wolf princess who goes on adventures. I've seen them in her room. They take a while to get through. 20 chapters, sometimes more. I turned back to face him. If you were to read her 1 chapter per visit, his breath caught. That's 4 or 5 months of story time. At least. In your home. Past her bedtime. Yes. He stood. And for a moment I thought he might try to embrace me. Instead, he just looked at me with those golden eyes that Luna had inherited, full of emotions he didn't have words for. Thank you, he said finally. Don't make me regret it. I won't. He moved toward the hallway where Luna's room was. Can I look in on her before I go? She's asleep. I know. He paused. Sometimes I can't believe she's real. That something so perfect came from someone as broken as me. She came from both of us. The words were out before I could stop them. He turned, and for a moment the years fell away. I saw the young man who'd looked at me before our mating ceremony, before everything went wrong. The man who'd felt the mate bond spark and had been too afraid to trust it. Yes, he said softly. She did. I walked him to Luna's door and watched as he crept in to kiss her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake, and he stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. When he came back out, his eyes were wet. Same time next week? He asked. Same time. He left. I watched from the window as his car wound back down the mountain road, disappearing into the darkness beyond my borders. Then I went to Luna's room and sat beside her bed, watching her sleep the way he had. Maybe, I thought, maybe some broken things can be reforged into something new. Not what they were. Too much had happened for that. Too much pain, too much betrayal, too many years of learning to live without him. But something, perhaps. Something built on choice rather than fate, on earned trust rather than magical bonds. It might never be enough. He might spend the rest of his life chasing a redemption that never fully arrives. But watching my daughter sleep, safe and loved and free to choose her own destiny, I thought that perhaps enough wasn't the point. Perhaps the point was simply trying. Simply showing up week after week and building something one small choice at a time. Perhaps that was all any of us could do. The moon rose over Moonhaven, bathing my daughter in silver light, and I closed my eyes and let myself imagine, just for a moment, what tomorrow might bring. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.